Friends on the other side of the aisle complaining constantly about tariff authorities. And I couldn't help but wonder, what would they do if they held all the levers of power? Well, they did hold the trifecta of power in 2021 and 2022. This committee marked up over 1,700 pages worth of partisan and bipartisan bills, which I have right here. Ambassador Greer, of these 1,700 pages, how many would you guess amended tariff authorities?
Probably zero.
That is correct. That would be zero. Zero changes to Section 232, 301, 122, or IEPA. If it's so important, why didn't they change the law when they had the trifecta of power? They
complained for years, loudly, constantly. But when they held every lever of power, they did nothing. Not one page, not one word. Watch what happens when that silence gets put on the record.
Mr. Yakym.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Greer, it's great to see you again. Thanks for being here. I hear my friends on the other side of the aisle complaining constantly about tariff authorities. And I couldn't help but wonder, what would they do if they held all the levers of power? Well, they did hold the trifecta of power in 2021 and 2022. This committee marked up over 1,700 pages worth of partisan and bipartisan bills, which I have right here. Ambassador Greer, of these 1,700 pages, how many would you guess amended tariff authorities?
Probably zero.
Zero. That single word just collapsed 2 years of political messaging in real time. This is not a minor procedural point. This is the architecture of a trap. Yakym didn't ask that question to get information. He already knew the answer. He asked it to force a public confirmation on record, in a hearing room, with cameras rolling. The Democrats spent years building an identity around protecting workers from corporate trade policy. But when they owned the House, the Senate, and the White House simultaneously, they touched none of it. Not Section 232, not 301, not IEEPA. They chose the Inflation Reduction Act instead, and called it infrastructure. The mainstream coverage of this hearing will focus on tariff numbers and trade frameworks. It will not focus on this moment, but this moment is the whole story. Drop a comment. Does political inaction disqualify a party from criticizing the policy they chose not to change?
That is correct. That would be zero. Zero changes to Section 232, 301, 122, or IEPA. If it's so important, why didn't they change the law when they had the trifecta of power? The complaints now ring hollow. They had 2 years to amend tariff authorities, but instead, they chose the Green New scam, green boondoggles, and massive spending that stoked generational inflation. I was glad to see the administration create Annex 3 in recognition of the fact that there are certain products and commodities that are not grown or produced here. And I was so excited when we finally clinched Annex 3 treatment for Luan wood products from Indonesia, which you and I have spoken about many times. Although it was a short-lived victory, since the Indonesia Agreement on Reciprocal Trade was announced the day before, Learning Resources, that decision when that came down. As you complete the ongoing Section 301 investigations, are you planning to maintain Annex 3 treatment for countries with an agreement on reciprocal trade?
I think what I can say on this, because the investigations are ongoing and we can't prejudge, but to the extent that the agreements on reciprocal trade mitigate any of the problematic trading practices we find, then we'll certainly take those into account.
Thank you, sir. I've heard from a number of businesses back home that want to expand their operations here in the United States and hire more people. But doing so often requires importing machinery, which certainly scrambles the economics of the investment. Now, sometimes this is a brand preference, but a lot of the time the machinery that they need to expand their factory just simply isn't made here or can't be made here. In some cases, these are not multi-million-dollar deals that'll make national headlines, but they'd be huge for the communities where investment is happening. How can we get relief for some of these companies that want to invest and grow jobs here, but are also stuck in that catch-22?
Sure. So just a few things on this. First of all, we do have the Small Business Administration that has opened a portal to help match up producers in America with suppliers and customers in America with each other. They also have some loan programs. If there's a cash flow issue, we have the big, beautiful bill where folks can expense capital goods, and that usually will include, if there's a tariff impact, it'll include that. I would also say a couple of weeks ago, the Commerce Department made an adjustment to the steel tariffs and derivatives. Some of these machine tools, I think, fell under derivatives. Some of these ended up being excluded altogether from that action and are subject to just a different and lower tariff rate. And we've also made compliance simpler for that. And as we go forward, as we have Section 301 or other investigations, we welcome comments during the public process on views on things that should have tariffs or shouldn't.
Thank you. And seeing something happen in that regard, even for smaller companies, smaller manufacturers that may not have a domestic option here at all, I think would be a very good thing. So thank you, sir. As it currently stands, the 25% Section 232 auto tariffs put North America's auto industry at a disadvantage when compared to the 15% auto tariff for the EU, Japan, and South Korea, and then 10% for the UK. Is there a plan to reconcile or recalibrate Section 232 auto tariffs as a part of or alongside the USMCA review?
So as we do the USMCA review, we do have to coordinate with the Department of Commerce because they have the autos 232 and USMCA has the auto rules of origin. So we'll coordinate with them, certainly. The Commerce Department has made accommodation for Mexico and for our domestic auto producers who are bringing in goods and products that have U.S. content, and they can have a parts offset to some degree to help have a transition to more production here in the U.S.
Thank you. And as you know, when the original USMCA deal was announced, it included tariff relief from Section 232 steel and aluminum tariffs in Canada and Mexico. Are you negotiating on steel and aluminum as a part of or alongside the USMCA review process?
Well, the Canadians and the Mexicans certainly want some kind of adjustment. President Trump has been very clear that it's important to have tariffs on these items, and they've been effective. We have the Gary Works is reopening, or excuse me, Granite City Works is reopening, which is a great outcome. We shipped more steel last year than Japan for the first time in a very long time. So Canada and Mexico are asking for adjustments. Anything on that front, the president would have to approve.
Right. Thank you, Ambassador Greer, for being here. Thanks to your staff for continuing to work with my team on these important issues. I do appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
What you just watched was not a policy debate. It was an autopsy, performed live on camera with the patient still in the room. Representative Yakym walked into that hearing with 1,700 pages of legislative history stacked in his hands, and he used every single one of those pages to build a single surgical argument. Not against the tariffs, against the credibility of everyone complaining about them. Here is what that moment actually means. When a party holds the House, the Senate, and the White House at the same time, they hold something rare in American politics. Total legislative authority. No filibuster excuse, no committee blockage, no presidential veto standing in the way. The trifecta is the closest thing Washington produces to unchecked power. Democrats held it in 2021 and 2022. And in that window, this committee alone produced over 1,700 pages of legislation. Climate provisions, spending packages, social programs, page after page of legislative ambition. 0 of those pages touched tariff authority, not Section 232, the national security provision that governs steel and aluminum, not Section 301, the trade enforcement tool used against China, not 122, not IEEPA, the tools they are now calling dangerous, unconstitutional, and reckless sat completely untouched while they held every pen in the building. But here is what nobody is asking. Why not? If these authorities represent such a threat to democratic governance, if handing a president this kind of unilateral trade power is as alarming as the opposition now claims, why did 2 full years of Democratic control produce 0 amendments, 0 reforms, 0 guardrails? Was it oversight? Was it a calculated choice? Or was it something more uncomfortable, that both parties have always preferred to keep those tools available, quietly, for whoever sits in the Oval Office next? Think about what this means if you are sitting in a swing district right now watching your constituents absorb tariff costs. The politicians representing you, on both sides, knew these powers existed. They knew they were broad. They knew a future administration could use them expansively, and nobody moved to limit them when they had the chance. The supporters of the current policy will tell you this proves the legitimacy of the tariffs, that if the legal authority was truly dangerous, Congress would have acted. They will say the silence of the previous administration is an implicit endorsement of the framework, that you cannot spend 2 years governing with these tools available and then suddenly declare them an emergency the moment the other party uses them. The critics will say something different. They will argue that legislative inaction is not the same as legislative approval, that Congress has a well-documented habit of ceding power to the executive branch and then expressing shock when that power gets exercised. That the failure to act in 2021 and 2022 was a failure of foresight, not a green light. Both camps are missing the larger point entirely. The real story here is not which party is right about tariff authority. The real story is that Congress, as an institution, has been slowly, quietly, systematically hollowing out its own power for decades. Trade authority, war authority, emergency powers, budget authority. Each generation of legislators hands a little more to the executive, keeps a little less for itself, and then acts outraged when the executive uses what was handed over. The 1,700 pages Yakym dropped on that table are not just a political rebuttal. They are a document of institutional abdication, a stack of proof that the branch of government constitutionally designed to regulate commerce chose to regulate everything else instead. There are historical echoes here that should make both sides uncomfortable. In 1974, Congress passed the Trade Act specifically to reclaim authority it felt the executive had accumulated too broadly. In 2015, it passed Trade Promotion Authority to hand much of that authority back. The pendulum has swung before. What is different now is the speed and the stakes. The tariff actions of the current administration are not being implemented in a stable global economy. They are landing in a world of fractured supply chains, post-pandemic demand distortions, and an international trading order that is being renegotiated in real time. The legal architecture was built for a different era. The arguments being made on both sides of this hearing room are being made with frameworks that may not survive contact with what is actually coming. If this is the layer of analysis you are not finding in the mainstream coverage, you already know what to do. The hearing will continue. The trade negotiations will continue. Countries will sign frameworks, break frameworks, and renegotiate frameworks. And somewhere in a committee room, the next stack of 1,700 pages is being assembled. Pages that will, in all likelihood, leave tariff authority exactly where it found it. Because that is what Congress does. Not because they forgot, not because they ran out of time, but because keeping those tools available, for whoever comes next, has always been the quiet preference of people who understand that power, once surrendered, rarely returns. The zero Yakym put on the record today is not a gotcha. It is a mirror. And neither party is going to like what they see in it. If this breakdown changed how you see what just happened, subscribe, share this with someone who thinks this story is simple, and drop your take in the comments. This conversation is not finished, not even close.